So you probably just got frustrated thinking, if I just find this right productivity app or planner, I'll finally get organized and stop procrastinating, fix my ADHD magically, and it just didn't work. It let you down and it made you feel harder on yourself. Let me tell you, this is a trap that you just fell into, and I'm gonna help you get out of that. This is called the tool trap. And what we're going to go over is what I like to call the tool trap framework. And there's basically 3 mistakes or mini traps that are keeping you stuck in there. You're on something called the new tool high. So I get it. When we get this new app or productivity tool, we feel like this big sense of hope. And that's that kind of rush that you get when you find a new system. Oh, finally, I can invest all my hope into this because I know that I'm not good enough. So maybe this thing is good enough if it's advertised to me as good enough. And because the setup feels productive, you start confusing that high with actual long-term change. So the hope is in this kind of tool. That's kind of like the equivalent of buying new workout clothes and then thinking, because I bought these clothes, I'm going to be really good at working out. Problem is, the clothes make it look like you're working on yourself, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to. So the real fix to this trap is simple. Setting these expectations that the tool you're trying out is not necessarily going to be the fix, but it's going to be something you're going to test. If you come from a testing mindset, your expectations are much lower from the start, and it earns itself like some sort of game, like it earns its points in your reward system. Instead of taking it away because you invested everything in the first place and now you got to earn your points back. And that leads to another problem that has to do with your foundations. Now, if you have ADHD, the second trap you're falling into that's keeping you stuck is something I like to call the ice cream versus sprinkles trap. Like, it's going to change everything foundationally about you and your ADHD and your management when it's really just an add-on. And here's the truth. Weak habits plus strong tools doesn't really make the tools useful, and you don't really get to use them to their full potential. So even though someone may find it really helpful, for you it may not be, because you haven't really understood your foundation. You don't really know if it's going to work the same way, because that person may have their foundation together and you may not. So the potential these tools show you may look different than theirs or as promised. And what does that do every time? That comes at the cost of our self-image. It makes us feel really crappy and guilt trip ourselves for no reason. The fix is actually really simple. It's just understanding that you need to work on your core foundations and then use these tools as sprinkles instead of treating them like they're going to change your whole life. So now it changes our focus to, okay, instead of depending entirely on these tools, I'm going to use them to help me with little things here and there, but I'm not going to expect them to change my whole life until I at least have some strong foundations built. But that leads to the biggest of the 3 problems. And because you can have the tools, you can have the foundations, but none of that's going to matter if you don't solve this last trap. And this is the one I like to call the spoon versus wrench trap. And that's where you force your ADHD brain into this neurotypical rigid system that blames yourself when it collapses. I feel like physical pain can be less painful than mental pain at times, especially with rejection sensitivity if you have ADHD, because we experience it 300% more than a neurotypical person does. And doing this is kind of like the equivalent of trying to unscrew a bolt with a spoon. And you can commit harder to the spoon and it still doesn't work because it needs a wrench. Yes, you can commit harder to making this spoon work. You can put more pressure into it. You can try harder like everybody tells you. But at the end of the day, the spoon's not going to do what a wrench can do. A neurotypical system just doesn't work for a neurodivergent brain. I've read so many productivity books that have guaranteed me, if you just try harder, you push yourself better, you discipline yourself more, everything's going to get better. And guess what happens when it all falls through the floor? We blame ourselves, right? Because if it works for everybody else and works for all these experts, but it doesn't work for us, we must be the problem, right? We think, wow, I am so far gone, I'm so broken that even what works for everybody and is proven to work for everyone doesn't work for me. And then we guilt trip ourselves more, and it leads to being depressed. So the way to avoid this trap and get out of it, if you do fall into it, is to stop comparing yourself to neurotypicals and their systems, because if you're neurodivergent, it just won't work for you the same way. So those expectations will totally fail you. Don't invest yourself so much into this product until you know it works. Instead, have a testing mindset and see how it works for you and let it earn points from your reward system, from your dopamine, instead of you just investing everything and trying to gain it back. And treat all of these kind of apps and planners and everything like that like tools. They can be useful, but not all of the tools in your tool belt are meant to solve the problem also, but do so intentionally instead of treating it like it's just going to fix your life. Otherwise, you're going to have no choice but to be hard on yourself when it doesn't work. And you're not going to know how to get out of it. And it leaves you in a worse place than before. At least before you were excited. Now you have nothing and you're down. So what's the solution? The solution is neuroplasticity. And you do that with something called executive function training. That's something I actually offer. Now, I have a free training that tells you exactly why you're stuck and what's going to help move you forward with your executive functioning. You can check that free training out in the link below. This really brings you into this more intentional mindset of how to approach these kind of tools when you see them. Like and subscribe if you found this helpful. Later, neighbors.